The United States just made a massive move, and France is furious. US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has just halted America's cyber war against Russia, and in doing so, he may have opened the floodgates for Russian President Vladimir Putin to target Europe, Ukraine, and the US with more cyber attacks than ever before. Hegseth's move raises several questions. Just what has he done? Why is France so furious? What prompted this reversal in US policy, and what impact will it have on Ukraine and Europe going forward? We start with Hegseth's decision. News emerged that Hegseth was spearheading US President Donald Trump's decision to pause all offensive cyber operations against Russia on March 3rd. The BBC reports that the move comes as the US continues its diplomatic push to end the Ukraine war. That could mean Hegseth believes that pausing cyber operations could apply pressure to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. By halting America's cyber operations, Hegseth leaves Ukraine vulnerable to a form of hybrid warfare that Russia has been using for years. But that's all speculative. The US didn't provide the BBC with the reason for the pause, with the Department of Defense refusing to comment when questioned. What we do know is that the news of Hegseth's directive comes in the immediate aftermath of the tense exchanges between Zelensky and Trump in the White House on February 28th. However, Hegseth apparently gave the order before that meeting took place, so US revenge on Zelensky for his supposed disrespect is off the table. The Associated Press built on the BBC's report on March 3rd. It claimed that a US official speaking on condition of anonymity had confirmed the pause. That official also suggested that Hegseth's directive only affects cyber operations being carried out by the Department of Defense. That means any operations the Central Intelligence Agency or CIA and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency have in place are still ongoing. However, the move also comes at a point when the Trump administration is rolling back several cybersecurity operations the FBI and other state agencies created to counter digital and cyber threats. That timing is likely what led to the unnamed official who spoke to CNN labeling Hegseth's decision a major blow. That official pointed out that cyber operations by their nature take a great deal of planning and research to carry out. The official also said that they're concerned that pausing these cyber activities will make the US more vulnerable to cyber attacks from Russia, which has already proven that it's willing to use a large cadre of hackers to get results. However, CNN did at least get some form of comment from the Department of Defense, or DoD, over the matter. Unfortunately, that comment doesn't explain the reasons behind Hegseth's decision. Due to operational security concerns, we do not comment nor discuss cyber intelligence, plans, or operations, reads the DoD statement. There is no greater priority to Secretary Hegseth than the safety of the warfighter in all operations, including the cyber domain. Hegseth's actions don't seem to line up with that statement, and other nations have taken notice. That's where France comes in. It's absolutely furious about the US choosing to suspend all of its Russia-focused cyber operations. That's according to Politico, which reported on comments made by French Foreign Affairs Minister Jean-Noël Barrot in the aftermath of the suspension story breaking. The best way to describe Barrot's reaction is one of confusion. "I have a bit of trouble understanding Hegseth's decision," Barrot said, while speaking to the France Inter-Monday public radio show on March 3rd. Barrot pointed out that European Union countries are constantly the targets of Russia's cyber attacks. He implies that the US pulling its cyber operations leaves Russia free to expand this particular brand of hybrid warfare across the European continent. France's President Emmanuel Macron has also highlighted Russia's use of cyber tactics to weaken its European enemies. Though Macron hasn't commented on Hegseth's operational pause yet, he was clear about the threat he believes Russia poses during a live social media appearance on February 20th. The Russians have globalized the war in Ukraine, Macron told viewers when asked if he believed Putin's invasion of Ukraine could result in World War III. Macron also noted that he'd organized the live social media stream to push back against the fake news he'd encountered recently, which included rumors that he was about to institute a draft in France. That's another example of the digital danger Moscow poses to the West. "Russia is attacking us on information, cyber," Macron said during his stream. He believes Russia uses these tactics to destabilize our democracies. To Macron and Barrot, Hegseth's decision to suspend US cyber operations simply opens the door for Putin to go all in on these destabilization efforts. And they're not the only ones who are upset with Hegseth. Several people in the US are baffled by Hegseth's decisions, including Democratic Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. In a statement published on March 2nd, Schumer ripped into the Trump administration. He claimed that Trump is so desperate to earn the affection of a thug like Vladimir Putin, he appears to be giving him a free pass as Russia continues to launch cyber operations and ransomware attacks against critical American infrastructure, threatening our economic and national security. Schumer went on to call Hegseth's decision, which hit most news outlets the day after he released his statement, a critical strategic mistake. Schumer may be right. Which leads us to the obvious question: why has Hegseth suspended America's cyber operations against Russia? It's a huge question, and France wants to know the answer. After all, cyber warfare is traditionally cheaper to carry out than sending a military force into a country. It's also a tactic the US can use covertly to spy on Russia and cause issues within the country, in addition to being a strategy that carries a low risk of direct military retaliation. Those benefits apply to Russia too, which can use cyber operations to steal competitive secrets from American companies and obtain sensitive military information. Cyber attacks can even disrupt supply chains and energy supplies, turning the internet into a battlefield. And with the rise of artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI, that makes it easier for nations to spread convincing propaganda, the cyber problem is only going to get bigger. Except that doesn't seem to be the way Hegseth sees it. According to The Guardian, our first answer for why Hegseth paused America's Russian cyber operations is that the US no longer sees Russia as a threat in that domain. On March 1st, the British news outlet reported that the Trump administration, both publicly and privately, doesn't believe that Russia presents a real threat to America's national security. Hints of this turnaround in US intelligence assessments came the week before when Deputy Assistant Secretary for International Cybersecurity at the US State Department, Liesl France, spoke to United Nations Working Group in Cybersecurity. She named China and Iran as nations that concerned the US with their cyber attacks, notably leaving Russia out of the conversation. France also made no mention of the Lockbit ransomware group. Based in Russia, Lockbit has previously been identified by the US as the world's most prolific ransomware group. The organization has even created a ransomware as a service model that allows other hacking groups to license the software they use in return for a portion of their ransom profits. James Lewis, who's a cybersecurity expert who used to work for the Center for Strategic and International Studies, was flabbergasted by France's purposeful omission. It's incomprehensible to give a speech about threats in cyberspace and not mention Russia, and it's delusional to think that this will turn Russia and the FSB, Russia's national security agency, into our friends, Lewis said. That friends comment provides a hint toward another reason why Hegseth made his decision, which we'll get to soon. Russia hates the US, Lewis added, and is still mad about losing the Cold War. Pretending otherwise won't change this. The US was also an outlier at the UN conference. Countries' Western allies, including speakers from the European nation and the UK, focused their talking points on the threat Russia poses. The UK also highlighted that Russia has used malicious cyber attacks against Ukraine for the entirety of Putin's invasion. The evidence seems to support Lewis's statements and those European speakers. According to the UK National Cyber Security Centre, or NSCS, Russia conducted a Europe-wide cyber attack just an hour before Putin's forces marched into Ukraine. That attack was launched against Viasat, which is a commercial internet service provider based in the US. Though the NCSS notes that the Ukrainian military was Russia's primary target in Russia's cyber attack, it also impacted personal and commercial internet users in Europe, along with several Central European wind farms. But what about more recently? The Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, has a useful timeline that showcases just how extensive Russia's cyber operations have been since 2006. In January 2025 alone, Russia carried out 3 major attacks. One included the use of spear phishing, which is a personalized form of cyber attack designed to convince individuals to discuss sensitive information that targeted Kazakh diplomatic entities. That attack also saw Russia embed malicious code into a document outlining an agreement between Germany and several Central Asian countries. Another January 2025 Russian cyber attack targeted Italy's government websites, supposedly as a response to Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's meeting with Zelensky that month. Plus, CSIS says that Russian cyber attacks against Ukraine rocketed up by 70% in 2024, with a total of 4,315 incidents being recorded. Those incidents include Russia targeting Ukrainian infrastructure, energy services, and its defense sector. For instance, December 20th, 2024 saw Russia carry out a mass cyber attack against Ukraine's state registries, which contain personal information about Ukraine's citizens. So it's very clear that Russia is extremely active on the cyber warfare front. However, you may also have noticed that none of these reported attacks, at least in January 2025, involved the United States. Perhaps that's why Hegseth believes Russia poses no cyber threat to the United States anymore. The majority of its attacks seem to be focused on Ukraine and European countries, including France and Italy. America's pausing of cyber operations may be part of a wider message that the Trump administration has delivered to Europe for the past several months. It's time for Europe to defend itself. The most recent example of that message came on March 7th. Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office, Donald Trump again accused America's NATO allies of not paying enough to fund their own defense. "It's common sense, right?" claimed Trump. "If they don't pay, I'm not going to defend them. No, I'm not going to defend them." Trump also claimed that Europe's collective higher spending over the last few years, which has resulted in 23 of NATO's 32 member nations hitting the organization's target of spending 2% of their GDP on defense, wasn't enough. They should be paying more, Trump said. Trump also questioned whether America's NATO allies would come to the country's defense if it was ever under attack. "Do you think they're going to come and protect us?" Trump asked reporters. "They're supposed to. I'm not so sure." The comments were strange given that the US is the only country to ever have invoked Article 5 of NATO's charter, which calls on all member nations to support any single member that experiences an attack on its own soil. The US invoked Article 5 on September 12, 2001, the day after the terrorist attacks, and many of America's NATO allies came to America's defense, including the UK and France. The latter was also involved in the war in Afghanistan from late 2001 until 2014, dedicating 23,200 service members, 86 of whom were killed in 2009 alone. Perhaps now it's becoming clearer why France is so angry about Hegseth's directive. The US suspending its cyber operations against Russia leaves France, along with the rest of Europe, more vulnerable to Russia. And that suspension is coming alongside the implication that France wouldn't fulfill its NATO commitments to the US, even though it's demonstrated in the past that it will. As for the US, it may see Russia's Europe-centric approach to its cyber operations as a sign that it isn't targeting them anymore. Combine that with the Trump administration's seeming efforts to separate itself from Europe on the defense front, and you have clear reasons why Hegseth made his decision. But there may be another factor at play. The US might not have suspended its cyber operations against Russia because it believes Russia no longer poses a threat. Instead, America may be doing it because it has another specific goal in mind: resetting its diplomatic relationship with Russia. We saw hints of this in mid-February 2025 when Trump and Putin sent delegates to Saudi Arabia for a meeting. Though that meeting primarily covered achieving some sort of peace in the Ukraine war, the two sides also turned their attention to economic opportunities. Politico reports that the two countries also talked about possible cooperation on future energy projects. Russian direct investment fund leader Kirill Dmitriev, who was present in Saudi Arabia, said that the economic conversation was more of a general discussion, maybe joint projects in the Arctic. We specifically discussed the Arctic. The Atlantic Council also suggests that the Trump administration is looking to reset its relationship with Russia. It notes that Trump began his second tenure as US president with a peace through strength message. He suggested tougher sanctions against Russia and seemed to support Ukraine's approach to future peace talks. February saw Trump conduct an about-face on that policy, starting with a meeting in Saudi Arabia. Since that meeting, Trump has labeled Zelensky as a dictator and taken part in an explosive meeting with Ukraine's president at the White House. Trump's Russian outreach has so far been marked by complimentary language, expressions of trust, and talk of new economic opportunities, claims the Atlantic Council. The US also voted against a UN resolution condemning Russia for starting the Ukraine war in late February. Again, these are signs that America's foreign policy is changing. The Kremlin agrees. On March 2nd, Putin's mouthpiece Dmitry Peskov said that Trump's changing foreign policies now largely coincide with our own. That's worrying to countries like France, which view Putin as not just a threat to Ukraine but all of Europe. It's also a potential reason for Hegseth's cyber operation pause. Trump's mention of trust may come into play here. If he believes he can trust Putin, he may also feel that pausing America's cyber operations shows Putin that Russia's leader can trust the United States. It's a "we'll scratch your back if you scratch ours" situation. If you don't attack us, we won't attack you. Contrast this approach to the one France takes. It condemned Russia in the previously mentioned UN resolution. It has also dealt with Russian cyber attacks as recently as December 2024, when Russian hackers targeted the official websites of several French cities. Macron also labeled Putin as a threat to France and Europe, at a time when the US seems to be taking the opposite stance. No wonder France slammed the US for its decision to halt its Russian cyber operations. It believes it's watching one of its closest allies transform in front of its eyes. We also can't ignore the impact that Hegseth's decision may have, both in the US and in Ukraine. Domestically, it's not yet clear how far-reaching Hegseth's directive may be. If it applies solely to what the record calls digital warriors focused on Russia, the suspension will affect hundreds of the American government's cybersecurity professionals. This includes personnel from the Cyber National Mission Force, which has 2,000 members, and the Cyber Mission Force. Collectively, those groups account for 5,800 personnel, most taken from the US military, with about a quarter of them being focused on Russia. That amounts to 1,450 cyber operations experts who may either be out of a job or forced to direct their efforts toward other countries. However, the record also says that Hegseth's order may extend to areas including analysis, intelligence, and capabilities development. If that's the case, the number of American cybersecurity professionals affected rises from 1,450 to several thousand. It's also possible that Hegseth may have Mexico on his mind. US Cyber Command is currently trying to boost its staff levels to better target Mexico's drug cartels, 8 of which the US now considers terrorist groups. The Trump administration blames these groups for the rise of fentanyl usage in the US. Hegseth may be thinking about transferring the personnel no longer working on Russian cyber operations to Cyber Command's Mexico-focused arm. Doing so would confront what he sees as a more direct threat against the US, even if that means weakening America's defenses against Russia. Then there's Ukraine. We've already mentioned that Ukraine experienced well over 4,000 Russian cyber attacks in 2024 alone. America was deeply involved both in helping to defend Ukraine against these attacks and in planning operations of its own. The record says that Cyber Command sent hunt-forward teams into Kyiv in the months leading up to Putin's invasion. Those teams helped Ukraine harden its digital defenses. Since Putin invaded, they provided Ukraine with intelligence on how Russia uses its digital capabilities. All of that disappears with Hegseth's order, which only feeds into the theory that the US is halting cyber operations so it can rebuild its relationship with Russia. Hegseth's order also creates the risk that Russia could target private American companies with its hacking attacks. The Trump administration is trusting Putin to not take advantage of a situation that seems ready-made to give Russia an advantage over its longtime adversary. To France, delivering those kinds of advantages to Russia is unthinkable. It believes the US has just severely weakened Ukraine at a critical juncture, with the US attempting to accelerate peace talks. It's just taken a step that comes close to crippling Ukraine's cybersecurity infrastructure. Russia now has a free rein to ramp up its Ukrainian cyber operations beyond the already record-breaking levels seen in 2024. That has knock-on effects for the rest of Europe. A weaker Ukraine means the rest of the continent, including France, has to deal with a stronger and more ambitious Vladimir Putin. However, there's one final twist to the tale. The US may not have stopped its Russian cyber operations after all. As if to confuse France and its allies even more, the Pentagon denied halting its cyber operations on March 4th, a couple of days after news broke that it had. Specifically, an unnamed senior defense official at the Pentagon told Bloomberg that Hegseth has basically done nothing. He hasn't given the order to suspend Russian cyber operations. He also hasn't directed the Pentagon to resume those operations. Nothing has changed, according to the unnamed source. That will only leave France, Ukraine, and the rest of Europe asking one serious question. What on earth is really going on with the US and its Russian cyber operations? Perhaps you have some ideas. Has the US halted its Russian cyber operations, or do you believe the Pentagon official who claims nothing has changed? What would happen if the US stopped focusing on Russia's cyber threat? And what do you think about France's response? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching the video.